Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, April 10th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Sam speaking to you and to Bruce from the past. It's a pre-tape. It's a long way of saying it's a pre-tape. Sam's interview with Bruce Schneier, lecturer in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School, author of A Hacker's Mind, How the Powerful Bend Society's Rules and How to Bend Them Back. Meanwhile, another day, another mass shooting in America. At least 5 dead and 6 injured at a shooting in Louisville. More information will be coming. A Trump-appointed Texas federal judge has ruled to invalidate the FDA's 23-year-old approval of mifepristone, which is one of the drugs in the abortion pill. Of which Washington federal judge then issued a contradictory ruling. But as it stands, the Biden administration is facing pressure from progressives and activists to ignore the Texas judge's ruling. Over 100 classified documents regarding the Ukraine-Russia war have been leaked to social media, some pertaining to very recent plans. The DOJ has launched an investigation into the leaks. Nashville lawmakers are set to vote today to reinstate one of the 2 expelled Tennessee Democrats, Representative Justin Jones, so he would fill that empty seat before a special election, which he also plans to run in. Good stuff. In a not-so-shocking twist, Clarence Thomas's Club for Growth billionaire patron buddy, big fan of Nazi memorabilia. A New York Times analysis finds that U.S. Bitcoin miners emit as much CO2 as 3.5 million cars. At least they're creating something of value, right? 3 unions representing 9,000 Rutgers University workers have gone on strike. Solidarity. Turns out there was a ton more to the story than being presented by Rebecca Jones, former Florida government employee and DeSantis critic. Her son was allegedly making threats to shoot up a school, which is why he was arrested. Speaking of DeSantis, Florida Republicans have proposed a bill that would allow for felony charges to be brought if you shelter undocumented migrants. How else do you call this? What else do you call this except fascism? Israel launched airstrikes into Syria over the weekend. A U.S. Navy ship purposefully passed through Chinese waters in response to China's military exercises in Taiwan, which was in response to Kevin McCarthy meeting with the Taiwanese president last week. Round and round we go. And lastly, in relationship news, Elon Musk and Matt Taibbi have broken up. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, everybody. Happy Monday. It's taken everything in my power not to just speak about the Succession episode last night for the next, hour or so, but we do have this pre-tape coming, so you'll get to hear from Sam, even though he's out for the rest of the week on vacation, bandying about Europe, doing God knows what with all that Cedar's seed money.
We're actually going to dedicate the whole show today to that Succession episode, so spoilers ahead.
No, actually not. We won't. We swear that we will not spoil it, but you guys, if you're not watching that show, you gotta watch that show. Best character drama on TV since Mad Men or The Americans. Although, I saw someone, I said that and someone responded to me saying like, well, is that, when you say character drama, is that code for, well, when nothing happens? Kind of. But I like it like that. I just like seeing characters do their thing. But again, I'll be handing this off to Sam in a sec. But we should talk a bit about this enormous update in the fight for abortion in this country. On Friday, the Friday news dump, Trump...
The Good Friday news dump.
Honestly, right. How Christ-like of him to essentially block medical care for half plus of the people that decide to end their pregnancies. They use the abortion pill. And this judge, a Trump appointee, Matthew Kacsmaryk, he's a known anti-abortion extremist, presides over the district court in Texas, in the Northern District of Texas, has declared that the FDA's approval of mifepristone in 2000, so it's a 23-year-old precedent, he's decided, I'm an anti-abortion extremist, so I'm going to declare that invalid using faulty conspiratorial logic that seemed to have been copy and pasted, if not heavily borrowed, from the plaintiffs and right-wing activist groups who were pushing for this. He issued this ruling on Friday, and luckily, the ruling has been stayed for a week to allow the Biden administration to appeal, so they're weighing their options right now. Also, luckily, a federal judge in Washington, right afterwards, issued a dueling injunction, which has compelled the FDA to allow mifepristone to continue to be sold in 17 states and DC. Now, that doesn't help a lot of other people in the country, but the ruling has been stayed in terms of declaring the drug illegal, which isn't even in a judge's legal purview necessarily, because the FDA has a statutory authority to make these decisions about drugs, and Congress actually has a process by which the FDA could withdraw the approval of a drug, but it has to go through a long congressional procedure. And so there's many different layers to why this ruling has faulty legal underpinnings, but that doesn't necessarily matter, right? Because the right-wing activists got what they wanted, and now there's a legal framework in place to potentially make one of the two necessary drugs for the abortion pill illegal. He, in his ruling, spoke, yes, about conspiracy theories, about the side effects of the drug, even though it's known to be incredibly safe, as safe, if not safer than Tylenol. And then also some of the weird theocratic underpinnings for his ruling included the usage of something called the Comstock Act, which is a long dormant act that is essentially an anti-obscenity law from the 19th century. And this Trump-appointed extremist judge declared that mailing an abortion drug would be a federal crime using this defunct Comstock Act because it's so obscene and promiscuous and disgusting, right? Because it pertains to birth control. So it really is Handmaid's Tale level crap here. And also, potentially, in and of itself, wildly beyond the scope of what the court should be engaged in legally. But the problem is that there is not a mechanism to check these judges in the way that they should be. We have a system of checks and balances in this country, theoretically, and this is part of what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was saying when she was interviewed about this ruling on CNN here. In the wake of this, she went on TV and spoke about this ruling and essentially said, hey, The Biden administration, what they should do, and this is my position as well, Ron Wyden actually said this first, and then Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez followed, ignore the ruling. Just ignore it, based on just the good for the country and the fact that this activist judge is going way beyond the scope of what his job and his powers particularly entail. But here you go.
There has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But is that...
Well, yeah. I wish we had the rest of that follow-up there from Anderson Cooper, but regardless, it still is... I concur. I concur with her reasoning there. The reality is just that in the abortion... or in the Constitution, there's no right to an abortion, true. You know what also is not in the Constitution? Judicial review. Judicial review goes back to nearly the founding of the country, but it's not in the Constitution. It's in Marbury versus Madison, which is in 1803. So if we're going to look at overturning past precedent, why not start there? They will never do that. It would undermine the power of the Supreme Court significantly. But the point here is that there is one thing in the Constitution that is relevant in this instance, and that is the system of checks and balances. The legislature and the executive branch now have an opportunity to put a check on the extremist courts and the judiciary. The Biden administration has an opportunity to do it. The legislature has an opportunity to do it. And they should. They should. Because a system of checks and balances is not really a system of checks and balances if one rogue body decides, hey, we're just going to do whatever the hell we want because we have a well-funded right-wing activist apparatus behind us and we're untouchable as judges. We're the priests. So for me, I like that approach. I saw some libs saying that this was an unserious take by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But frankly, I think it's unserious to dismiss this entirely because if you're institutionalists, there's nothing more embedded in what's supposed to be embedded in the U.S. systems and institutions than the system of checks and balances. And right now, the court needs to be checked. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, but first, a word from some of our sponsors. Did you know that it can take up to 11 weeks on average to hire for an open position? Do you really have that kind of time to wait? I mean, that means you're doing extra work if you have an unfilled position for that period of time. If you're listening today, stop waiting and start using ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter can help you find qualified candidates for all of your roles fast. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/majority. How is ZipRecruiter so efficient in helping you hire? Well, ZipRecruiter uses powerful matching technology to quickly find and send you the most qualified people for your roles. You can check out the people that ZipRecruiter sends you and personally invite them to apply with one click, which may make them apply even sooner. It really just streamlines the process, and we've told this before. This is how we found Brendan, who then was a big part of the reason that we hired Bradley, and Brendan still does great work for us on our show. He helps book the amazing guests that we get. And that's all because Sam was able to find him through ZipRecruiter. So you can check out the people that ZipRecruiter sends you and personally invite them to apply with one click, which may make them apply even sooner. Plus, here's how quickly ZipRecruiter can work to help you hire. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. That's really quick. So speed up your hiring process with ZipRecruiter. See why 3.8 million businesses have come to ZipRecruiter for their hiring needs. Just go to this executive web address, or exclusive, not executive, but executive as well. Exclusive web address to try ZipRecruiter for free. ZipRecruiter.com/majority. That's ZipRecruiter.com/majority. Again, ZipRecruiter.com/MAJORITY. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And hey, 420. It's nearly here, guys. Nearly here. And there's no other sponsor that is more relevant to that holiday coming up than Sunset Lake Seder. Sunset Lake Seder. So Sunset Lake and the Majority Report are teaming up to turn 420, the classic stoner holiday, into a fundraiser for the Last Prisoner Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to cannabis criminal justice reform. And by the way, the Majority Report is going to match Sunset Lake's donations in this effort. So here's how it works. Starting today, everything on Sunset Lake Seder, that's C then B then D.com, will be 30% off. Whoa! With the coupon code 420. And orders over $150 will get a free jar of gummies of their choice included in the order. Those gummies are amazing. They taste really good and they help you relax. And I've said this before. I literally just put on this lotion. This is a Sunset Lake lotion. It smells incredible. I like the scented stuff. This one is jasmine scent. I just put some on because I was a little dry, you know? Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I also use their gummies with melatonin in them basically every night to fall asleep. It's an incredible product and it really, really works. It's not some of the like bodega CBD junk that you see advertised. You know what you're getting with Sunset Lake, third party tested, just great labor practices, all that stuff. So go to sunsetlakesebede.com for 30% off with the code 420. 5% of all proceeds at the end of the sale will be donated to the Last Prisoner Project, and MR will match again the donations for Sunset Lake in this effort. So go to sunsetlakesebede.com for 30% off with the coupon code 420. Sunset Lake's biggest sale of the year. It ends on April 23rd. Don't miss it. Head on over to sunsetlakesebede.com to take advantage of this deal and help raise money for cannabis criminal justice reform. Some restrictions apply. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, you will be hearing for Sam's pre-recorded interview with Bruce Schneier.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Joining me now, Bruce Schneier. He is a lecturer in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School, author of his most recent Hacker's Mind, How the Powerful Bend Society's Rules and How to Bend Them Back. Bruce, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So you've taken the concept of hacking, I guess, and sort of, I don't know if you've redefined it. I mean, I think many people sort of perceive hacking as to be perceived as sort of like someone, an outlaw, if you will, breaking into systems. But in some ways you've decided to provide this as a conceptual framework for really where power comes from in our society and who is doing the hacking.
And I'm going back to a more original definition of hacking. You're right, hacking we think of now as criminal, but the term really is a clever way of getting something done. We're not breaking the rules, we're subverting them. We hacked it together. A hack as getting the computer to do something that it might not have been supposed to do, but the code says you can do it. So that's really the flavor I'm trying to get at. Yeah, hacks can be illegal and hacking can be illegal, but doesn't have to be, right? That's a legal system imposed on top of the set of rules. So I'm thinking of it as a loophole, as a way to follow the rules but subvert their intent. So if you hacking into a computer system, you're following the rules of the software, but you're doing something that the programmers didn't anticipate. You found a vulnerability, an exploit, a loophole. If you hack the tax system, you're finding a way to not cheat on taxes. Taxes are legal, but a loophole, something that wasn't intended, a trick, a way to save money that subverts the system in some way, but is allowed by the letter of the rules. So that's the flavor I'm going for. So think of the filibuster, right? A hack from ancient Rome. Cato the Elder looks around and says, the rules say we have to conduct business by sundown. So if I never stop talking, we can't get anything done, right? So he's looking at the rules and using them in a way they weren't anticipated. That's the flavor I like.
It's interesting as you raise that, because I many years ago, I heard a story. I was in Australia and they were talking about these 4-day test matches in cricket. And I don't really understand the game, but they one of the pitchers decided like, oh, well, we're going to run out of time, which was not typical in cricket. Cricket would just go on and finish when it finishes, as opposed to like a time. And so he started to roll the ball, making it almost impossible for the hitter to hit. And apparently, oddly enough, the fans, oddly from an American standpoint, but maybe not so much from an Australian one, the fans started booing their own team because they're like, you're not playing the game in the way that it's meant to. What are the safeguards for the abuse? I mean, you bring up the filibuster. What are the safeguards for that in the context of a hack?
Well, let's use your cricket example. So, look what happened. I'm sure the rules were silent on whether you're allowed to roll the ball or not. So you pick up the rule book and it doesn't say you got to actually throw the pitch. You can't roll the ball in an effort to delay time and win when you're already ahead, right? It's against the spirit of the game. And the fans recognize that. It was against the spirit of the game, even though the rules permitted it. And what probably happened, I don't know if this is true, but happens a lot in sports, is that whoever is in charge of cricket on this planet took the rule book and edited it. So an example I use in my book, a team shows up in the 1970s on the Formula One racetrack with a 6-wheeled car. And everyone says, just like that cricket match, you can't have a 6-wheeled car. They pull out the rule book and say, show me. And the rules were silent on the number of cars, the number of wheels a car could have. And what happened was that the standards body in charge of Formula One racing, they have a French name, I forget who they are, changed the rules. So now you look in the rule book, you can't have no more than or no less than, in case you are also wondering, 4 wheels. Now there's another cricket hack that is still being done. Someone a few years ago realized you could hit the ball behind you. You can't do this in baseball, you can do it in cricket. I also don't know the rules of cricket, but supposedly it is a thing. The rules didn't prohibit it, but no one thought of it before. Never occurred to anybody. Someone does it, and now it's part of the game. So here's what happens in a hack. Whoever's in charge gets to decide, is it in the spirit of the game or not? Should we allow it or not? In cricket, it's whoever that organizational body is. For the U.S. Senate, it's whoever makes the rules of the Senate. For a lot of things, it's the court system. If it's a vulnerability in Microsoft, the Microsoft company gets to decide whether they patch the rules.
I mean, it's interesting. It brings up the dilemma. Maybe we can talk about this in a bit, though. There is a governing body for cricket. We have at least some transparency as to why somebody doesn't fix maybe the filibuster rules in the Senate. I mean, but The real problem, it seems to me, comes when these hacks are not necessarily as transparent to the broader society, and that the powers that would fix these hacks to the benefit of society are captured by the same people who are performing the hacks.
And that's where power comes in. And this book is really about power. So let's take some tax loopholes as an example of that. So a tax loophole is kind of a mistake in the tax code. We write the tax code, it's complicated, and we made a mistake, and someone clever found if you could put these rules together, you can avoid taxes. The carried interest loophole is an example, or the double Dutch Irish sandwich that companies like Apple and Google use to evade U.S. taxes for, I think, years, if not decades.
Yes.
Right. So these are mistakes, and they can be fixed.
Well, they are features or bugs that don't align with the stated goals associated with what they're doing. I mean, I wonder if the carried loophole is a mistake in the sense that the people who put that in there, I have a feeling, know exactly what they were doing.
So let's leave that aside for now. Let's assume that was an error. Certainly the double Dutch Irish sandwich, integrating the laws of US, Netherlands, Ireland, and an offshore tax haven, that was an emergent property. That was a mistake.
Right. Unanticipated. Right.
Right. Unanticipated, unintended. They appear, they're used. And you're right. A tax loophole, even the carried interest loophole, no one announces that they're using it. Right. We find out about it slowly. And some of these loopholes can be closed by the IRS. Some are so big they require Congress to close them. And that's where power gets in. But we've been trying for 20 years to close the carried interest loophole. We've been unable to because of lobbying, because the money that is making money from this loophole is also paying politicians to keep it open. So, right. So there's no money who is going to ensure that the rules of cricket allow for the rolling of the ball, or the rules of Formula One racing allow for a six-wheel car. But there is going to be money to fight for whatever loopholes Uber is using, so they don't have to classify their workforce as employees, or whatever loopholes rich people are using to evade taxes, or whatever loopholes that hedge funds are using these days. And hedge funds are full of loopholes. Right? I mean, hacking is what they do. So yes, power matters a lot here, because power can go up a level and do their best to ensure that their hacks remain legal, whereas the hacks that you and I might use, regular people might use, get closed. And I remember an example. This was after Trump's tax cuts. He limited the amount of money you can save in your taxes on state and local taxes. So here was the hack. We all learned, you prepay your taxes for next year, this year, right? You've paid the tax this year. You take the deduction this year because you won't get it next year. That was the hack. And pretty quickly, the IRS said, no, it's not going to work. Don't do that. We're not going to accept that.
Right.
And there wasn't really a lobbying interest to keep it open. And that's a hack that was quickly closed by the IRS. Hacks that the wealthy and powerful use are much more likely to stay open.
Let's talk about some of the ones. I mean, and I should say, like, your book is full of all of these examples, both historical and contemporary, in all sorts of aspects of our lives. Let's talk about some, because it gives an example, obviously, of how quickly, when the hacks run, like you say, run contrary to the power, they get fixed pretty quick. When they're not so much. Like, let's talk airline frequent flyer hacks. I am quite convinced that I ended up going to Australia. This was now 30 some odd years ago, on just patching together a bunch of different people's airline miles. I think that I could buy at that time, if I remember correctly.
You can, frequent flyer plans have gone through a lot since the mid 80s when they were invented. I certainly hacked them to get trips cheaper, to get more miles. Mileage runs were a thing. Remember, you'd look for flights that were very long and very cheap because you'd get positive payout in miles, because you maybe get a threshold. Airlines have gotten way better at managing that. I think that was primarily a compute problem, that it was just so hard to find all of the places where you could arbitrage miles and money. And now they're much better at it. In fact, most airline miles aren't really miles anymore. They're substitutes for dollars. I mean, I'm a Delta Airlines person, and and they're called miles, but you really get them based on the dollars you spend, not the miles you fly. So they've done a lot to reduce that sort of hacking. But that was certainly a big thing in the 90s. And there were websites, and even now there are places you go online to get tricks on how to hack your airline miles.
Oh, I got to check that out, actually. And ATM, tell us about the ATM hacks. And a lot of times these hacks really take place more often than not at the beginning of, at least in the context of like certain technologies or I guess new features, when they first get rolled out, because people can't necessarily anticipate how the hacks are deployed.
Right. And hacking of ATM machines is a good example of hacks that are all illegal. So hacking happens at different levels. When you hack an ATM machine, you're basically hacking a computer, right? ATM machine is just a computer with money inside. So there are hacks against the software that traditional computer hackers use to get it to spit out money. The phrase is called jackpotting, and it's when the ATM machine just spits out lots of money. And over the years, different hackers have figured out ways, and they do them in different parts of the planet with maybe less good police forces, and maybe they didn't have video cameras at the time. But there were several impressive hacks against ATM machines. You find a trick, and if you're a criminal gang, you deploy people like across the planet, because you want to do it all on one weekend before anybody figures it out and patches your vulnerability.
Do they still do the, there was when ATMs first came out, there was this, it was a genuine fear for a while. You had to double check that you were actually running your card through the actual card reader and not one that was sort of like supplanted on front of it, right?
So there are, so they're called skimmers, that you put a device in front of the card reader, that when you put your card reader in, it grabs your code, and then you've got a little video camera watching your PIN, so your card can be cloned. Cloning cards is largely no longer a problem because of anti-cloning measures. Another trick, and this was done, you just put on a suit, you walk up to someone with working on an ATM machine, you say, "Excuse me, but that ATM machine is broken. Please use the one over there." The person just does that because you're wearing a suit. That means you work for a bank, obviously.
Of course.
They do their transaction, and when they're gone, you complete their transaction and take more money. So that was done. And you had machines that would grab the card, so you couldn't do that. That was a quick fix. The fix that happens now is that the systems are smart enough to realize if there are two transactions happening at the same time, and they know something is amiss. But that was done for a while. That was a good hack. Whenever there's systems where someone wants an advantage, there are going to be hacks. Now, you haven't asked, but I very much like my hacks of different religious rules in my book. I think those are a lot of fun.
Yes, I was going to go. Let's do that.
Well, let me give you a hack that isn't in the book that I just found out last week. So this is the mid-1800s. There is a spate of random murders in Europe, mostly Northern Europe, weirdly, mostly Denmark. And I'm going to explain the hack. You want to commit suicide. The problem is, if you commit suicide, you're going straight to hell. Your religion teaches you you're going straight to hell. No negotiation with God. It is a mortal sin. You're going to hell forever. But if you kill somebody, you will be executed. And before you're executed, you can confess to a priest. So, and I'm not making this up, random murder was a hack around the religious prohibition of suicide.
Oh, geez.
And this was a problem, and they only solved it when they limited capital punishment.
Interesting. I did not. I had no idea of that.
I had no idea either. Someone sent that to me in email last week. It's a great story.
Turducken. I only, like, I guess in the past couple of years became even aware of it, but turducken is like it's like there's multiple meat. Will you just explain what a turducken is?
A turducken is a chicken stuffed in a duck, stuffed in a turkey. You take the bones out because otherwise you can't do that. But it is one of a series of these kind of things stuffed into other things, which is reasonably popular late medieval ages, Renaissance, as something you would do at feasts, at banquets. And actually, this is a hack. And when this gets around sumptuary laws. So sumptuary laws are laws prohibiting or limiting public displays of ostentation. And they're generally put in place because the nobility is bankrupting itself, trying to outdo each other. Right? I need my banquet to be better than your banquet. So I spend more money than you. And then you got to spend more money the next time. And someone else spends more money. We're all unhappy because of this arms race. So we pass a law saying, all right, we're going to limit the number of courses at a banquet. You can't do more than 5 or 6 or whatever it is. And now we are forced not to compete. But these kind of things stuffed into other things were a hack because they counted as one meat. Generally, these sumptuary laws on banquets only covered courses with meat. Vegetable course didn't count. Also, a course with 2 meats still counts as a meat course. So you would display your wealth by having these meat stuffed into meat courses.
It's actually pretty tasty, but putting that aside,
hard to cook. I mean, I've done it once. It's not worth it.
Talk about the one from WCIS in Worcester, because I'm quite convinced. Well, I know that my first bank account was at WCIS in Worcester, and there was a now account. It was, I was too young to really know, but tell us about that. I found that interesting. I had no idea that kind of innovation was happening in Worcester at the time.
And this is the 1970s. This is one of a long line of ways that savings banks figured out ways that they can give people more interest. Right? Savings banks are limited by law in the interest they can charge at the time, but interest rates were higher, and people weren't putting the money in banks because it was just dumb. You could put your money in other places where you get a lot more interest. So they would look at the rules and create these accounts that acted like bank accounts, but technically weren't, which would allow them to offer their depositors higher interest. Now accounts were the first example of that from the 1970s. Certificates of deposit were those, and then there were examples of things that were like that, but you could take your money out at any time. A whole series of those. I mean, and this all goes up to, Dodd-Frank, where banks are still taking the rules and looking for loopholes, looking for ways to avoid their intent because they don't like them. So yeah, I mean, banking, finance, lots of hacks, really all through history.
Let's talk about Uber. I mean, there's a couple of different ends of the Uber of hacks. Uber itself is sort of there's multiple hacks associated with it on the sell side, insofar as they were essentially breaking local laws and coming in and I mean, all the hacks associated with that. There, you also write about in Nairobi hacks that go the other way against Uber. Tell us about that. And I'm curious as to why that doesn't happen more often.
Let's start with the hacks that Uber did, because I think it illustrates a really good point that whether hacks are good or bad is sometimes contested. So Uber, bunch of hacks against existing taxi rules, against employment rules, against common carrier. I mean, lots of rules Uber is hacking to make their system work. And so they get around local taxi regulations, they get around local hiring regulations, they get around vehicle regulations. they set this up so that you're not considered to be working with Uber until you have a passenger. So if you drive around fast trying to get a passenger and you get into an accident, you're not with Uber at that time, so it doesn't count. They have a bunch of things. And we could talk about whether they're good or bad. I mean, I think there's a lot of bad, but you could also say that the taxi industry in the United States was moribund, was captured by these local powerhouses that didn't allow cities to innovate, and Uber forced innovation in taxis. Both of those things are true. And whether we decide that Uber is, in the end, good or bad for society isn't obvious. We might want to say you're good, but you want to follow these rules, or these rules that you decided you didn't have to follow and gave all these hacks. Why not? Those rules we don't need anymore. I mean, this is a policy debate that's sort of beyond the scope of me. I'm a security person, but it's an important one.
Yeah, I would say, like, I mean, this is in some level. I mean, I think that I don't want to get off the topic here, but that dynamic is also why I think, like, conceptually what you've done here is so helpful, because you need to identify what is problematic about this. I mean, I think, like, certainly I know in this city when Uber first came out, I knew a lot of Black people, frankly, who were like, I'm able now to get a car. Like, there's a lot of cabs that when I wave for a cab, they won't stop and pick me up. And that Uber sort of changed that dynamic. At the same time, you have all the things you talk about in terms of, like, what they've done with local regulation. Also, the way that they, in my opinion, misidentify their relationship with their, with the drivers and basically, pretend that they're not employees, et cetera. But in identifying and having a conceptual framework to find out what is specifically problematic about these things, it gives an opportunity for how you go about fixing it.
And that's right. So, I mean, another thing that Uber did in the United States, taxi driver used to be one of the most dangerous professions you could have. It was incredibly dangerous. And through the use of the Uber system, which is basically surveillance on both sides and a desire for good rankings on both sides, everybody's incented to be nice and not to attack each other. I mean, that fails. I mean, there are examples, not especially not outside the US, where people who couldn't get a taxi license were able to drive for Uber, and they would go on to assault and rape women. So it's not all good. But in general, in the United States, driving an Uber is much safer than driving a cab. So let's talk about the other way. It's actually, yes, let's do that. So you mentioned Nairobi. There are several different ways that the drivers are trying to hack Uber. The earliest one in the United States was you would drive for both Uber and Lyft. Both of them hated that, and they tried to stop you. And in the end, they gave up, because everyone does it. Because that way, right, you as the driver can pick the best of deals that show up. You're not tied in to one of these platforms.
And it changes the power dynamic between you.
Changes the power dynamic. In other countries, they'd go further than that. So the Nairobi example, this is true elsewhere in the world, is you would be on Uber and get a ride, but when you showed up, you'd say, let's just dump this Uber business, right? They're just taking a half, and you pay me directly. So the passenger would cancel Uber, probably get a small charge, and then the driver would drive the passenger. Now, and that worked out best for both of them financially. Driver probably gave them a discount. Driver also got more money because Uber was cut out. Now, you lose the safety. Both the passenger and the driver are now trusting each other, so we're back into gypsy cab land. But there's money savings. There's also tricks that are done. It's not Uber, but it's similar. So Amazon Prime, often drivers are like Uber drivers. They have their own cars and delivering packages, and they compete Uber-like for jobs. And often depends on where you are. So drivers got to where they would hang their phones near the Amazon warehouse, so they'd be perceived to be closer than they actually were, so they would get the jobs.
Interesting.
Right? So they would fake their location. Or, if they couldn't do that, they would, spoof their GPS somehow. And a way to trick the Amazon system to give you the job because it thinks you're closer than you are to the Amazon warehouse.
Interesting. Why didn't the thing that they do in Nairobi, why didn't that catch on in more places? I mean, why?
It feels cultural. I mean, how would you feel if you call an Uber, the driver drives up, you get in, and the driver says, "Hey, I got a deal for you. Cancel, and I'll charge you 3/4 of what Uber says you should get." Would you take that or not?
Yeah.
I'm not sure everybody would. Right? I think some people would and some people wouldn't. Some people might report the driver to Uber.
Right.
I mean, I think it depends a lot on culture here. Right? Do we feel safe? Is that kind of stick it to the man culture pervasive? Do we think we'll get away with it for a while? Because if I'm a driver, I do that twice and then Uber finds out and kicks me off their system. That's terrible.
Right.
So it really depends a lot on culture, whether that catches on or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I imagine there's only so many times you can have somebody cancel on you until they start to go like, wow, they know exactly.
It's suspicious.
They know exactly what the rate of cancellations are. I would imagine they have all the data there. So, I mean, and the book is full of these type of hacks, but so ultimately, like what, from the perspective of those of us who see the power dynamics that are at play here, right? That these hacks get exploited more by the powerful. They are not just exploited more by the powerful, but it's only when the powerful are hacked that we see fixes, for lack of a better term. What is the mechanism when the power dynamic is not in the favor of, let's say, the people, broadly speaking? Like, what is the mechanism to fix that?
I think it's to recognize the power dynamic and to fight against it. I mean, some tax loopholes of the rich do get closed. I mean, we were really close on closing the carried interest loophole. One senator away. I mean, that's pretty darn good. And maybe we'll do better next time. So it's not all doom and gloom. It just means that the rich are much more likely to have their hacks be enshrined into law or be ignored by the authorities. That it's not impossible. But recognize that the power dynamic's not on our side. And we have to do more organizing, more lobbying, more pushing if we expect these things to get better. I mean, Uber has not won every one of its cases in court.
Right.
And there are places where the judges said, no, your drivers are employees. Stop trying to pretend otherwise. And they're in places where they've been told, your drivers have to succumb to background checks. And now they do. And Airbnb is similar. There are cities that have said, you're running a hotel. It's a distributed hotel, but it's still a hotel. And here are now the rules you have to follow. There are some cities where Airbnb has managed to evade all those rules still, but they don't win all the time. So it's not all terrible. And the points I make in the book is that sometimes hacking is innovation. Right? That hitting your cricket ball over your head was exciting, and now the sport has changed for the better because someone figured that out. Hockey is the same way. Curving your hockey stick was a hack, and it gave the game is much faster. The puck gets air. It's way more dangerous, but it's way more exciting, and the league likes it. So now everybody does it. So it isn't all that just the rich and powerful get their hacks. Sometimes things go the other way. And I will probably get to it. I talk about artificial intelligence at the end. And there, I think we have the opportunity to change the dynamic in ways that will be new. And I think that is something is worth talking about.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, I as far as like, I think, to the extent that people have had, your average person has had any experience with AI, to the extent that they have, it may be some version, maybe, I guess, arguably of like a Netflix algorithm, maybe, or.
Well, it's Netflix, it's Facebook, it's Google. I mean, every time something on the internet recommend something to you, there is an AI algorithm behind it. Might be a primitive AI algorithm, but there is something that is deciding what you should see next. That is how most people are interacting, but also other ways. I mean, AIs are making decisions on who gets government services. They're making loan decisions. They're making, and this is not good, bail and parole decisions sometimes. They're making college admission decisions.
Pre-crime in some cities around the country.
Right. So predictive policing, where to deploy your police in advance of crimes. These are all increasingly being done by AI. If you've been in a driverless car, right, the AI is deciding when to apply the brakes.
So hopefully.
Well, it is deciding. We just hope it's deciding well.
So what are the implications relative to your conceptual framework in terms of AI?
So hacking is a creative endeavor. Think of the person who discovered the carried interest loophole or that double Dutch Irish sandwich, right? It's a person, it's an accountant, it's an attorney who's pouring through the letters of the law and says, aha, I found something. And then he goes to his bosses at Goldman Sachs or somewhere, and everyone says, whoa, that's a good idea. And now they package it and sell to their wealthy clients, right? That's the way it works. So that's a creative process that an AI could take over. And just as AIs are now finding vulnerabilities in computer code, they can find vulnerabilities in the tax code. I mean, not yet, but this is probably pretty near term, right? You feed it. The tax code is a bunch of algorithms. It's formulas. Right. So you feed it the nation's tax law, the world's tax law, and say, figure out how I can pay less tax. And then it chugs along. And it's interesting. Will it figure out you should register your ship in Panama? You should incorporate in Delaware. You should do these things we never thought of. And I think there's the possibility that this kind of AI will find all sorts of new tax loopholes that we've never discovered. All right, so that's on the bad side. But on the good side, we can do that in the interest of transparency. Somebody like me, you, a university, the press, a public policy organization, could do this with the tax law in an effort to find and expose tax loopholes so they can be fixed. Or take a new tax bill and do it with the new bill and say, here's where the loopholes are. Doesn't guarantee they get fixed, right? Politics is complicated, but they become public, they become part of the debate. So I think an AI that can find loopholes has really the benefit of helping the defense as well as the offense.
But won't that run in, and you tell me, because I have no idea of like what resources one needs to run a program like this. But that's sort of, I mean, the similar sort of like dynamic. Will you tell me, is that not similar to the dynamic we have now? Like, I mean, if there are accountants out there whose job it is to find a tax loophole for their clients, theoretically, there could also have been government accountants who are said, like, scour through this, find out where the loopholes are, send us a report down to Congress, and when we do the next tax bill, this is something we're going to look at. The resources are, if I'm a billionaire, I have a lot more, like I can expend a lot more money to save myself a lot more money than maybe the government is incentivized to try and figure it out, because they also know we can figure this out, but we're going to take the guy to court and it's going to cost us. How much access will we who don't have the power, how leveling will AI be, or will the dynamic that exists now where hacks for the powerful are more obscured and less addressed than the not powerful, will AI level that playing field, or that dynamic stay the same?
So this is bigger than this conversation. And right now, the AIs are being created by powerful corporate monopolies, right? It's OpenAI, which is really, really Microsoft now. It's Google, it's Facebook, Amazon's is coming online. And this is what we're seeing. So right now, if there is going to be an AI trained on hacking the tax code, it's in the basement of a large multinational financial firm. Right? It is not going to be run by a university or the press or the government. Now, I don't know if that That's probably going to change. Right now, it takes an enormous amount of computing power to build one of these models. The models themselves aren't very big. I mean, Facebook's model was stolen a few weeks ago, and it runs on a powerful laptop. So you could run yours, but creating it isn't it? Creating GPT-4 is probably the single most complicated computation in human history. It is enormously resource intensive. And we do not know yet if that is essential or if that is just the blip where we are today. Right, we're doing the software for the moon landing was incredibly computation intensive, and now you can run it on your phone, right? So things are going to change. But as long as these AIs are being controlled by these corporations, what you'd speak of is going to be a problem, that they're not going to do the work of the people, they're going to do the work of their corporate masters. So I think it's real important for us as society to get some of these models built in universities, in government labs, that are built by us and for us and not being controlled by a corporation. That is bigger than us. But at least in theory, we can imagine there being a model that you have access to, that you can do this on. There's nothing about AI that makes that infeasible. It's just that we have not decided as a people to fund a public model. We're just letting corporations do what they want. That is probably a mistake.
That sounds like definitely a mistake to me. It hadn't occurred to me, but when you lay it out that way, to make this tool an exclusive, de facto exclusive tool used by the most powerful in our society, I don't think that's going to work out for the vast majority of us.
I mean, a lot of us played with ChatGPT, and OpenAI decided, to make that model available to us to play with because it wanted to use all of our play to improve GPT-4.
Of course.
Right. I mean, it's not benevolence. That was, all right, you world, why don't you do some development testing for us? We'll watch, and then we'll make the next model better.
That's what Alexa and Google Talk and Siri are all doing the exact same thing, right? They're just like, we're going to use you to train our technology.
And I worry about, the Siri and Alexa and hey, okay, Google, whatever that one is, that, they're doing things for us, but in the end, we don't control them. And we do not know if advertisers are allowed to manipulate the results. We don't know whether we're getting fair answers. We certainly know if we go on Amazon's website to buy stuff, we see the stuff that people pay Amazon to show us. We 100%. Don't see the things we search for.
Yes.
Right? These are not systems that are working in our interest. We really do need AI, or at least an AI that does work in our interest. It's very powerful for us to have an AI that can advocate on our behalf. That will be enormously beneficial to us. But we have to know it'll advocate on our behalf.
Is there no initiative whatsoever in our government to develop this or research funding? None?
No, we don't do that. We let corporate America do the research.
That's amazing because, you look at how many technologies the government has initiated and the idea.
Yeah, but none recently. That's 1960s thinking.
Interesting.
Right? That's Skunk Works. That's, our getting the nuclear bomb, the space program. What has the government done for us since space food sticks? I don't know. I guess the internet, but that was a while ago.
Is there anybody that you've seen in Congress that is like raising the alarm bell on this? Or is it just,
we're seeing more. I don't know no details, but people are starting to talk about this, that there should be some alternative. I think we're going to have some really interesting conversations about AI in the coming months. And I actually want to caution all of your listeners and readers and watchers that anything you see today that's a limitation of the systems, don't think of them as essential. There's going to be an enormous amount of progress in the rest of this calendar year. And I see things that don't work very well, that are sloppy. ChatGPT is dumb. It hallucinates. That's not essential. that stuff's going to get better very, very quickly.
Wow. It's a little bit scary to me.
A little bit scary.
Bruce Schneier, lecturer in public policy, Harvard Kennedy School, author, A Hacker's Mind, How the Powerful Bend Society's Rules and How to Bend Them Back. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun.
We are back. We are back. I hope everyone enjoyed that interview with Bruce Schneier. He is excellent. With that said, we're going to wrap up the first hour of this program and head into the fun half where we'll be playing some clips, responding. Hey, I mean, Elon and Matt Taibbi, the fallout, the breakup. We'll be getting into that as well as some of the unhinged responses, efforts to defend Clarence Thomas from having a benefactor who collects Nazi memorabilia. So we'll be talking about all of that in the fun half. On ESVN today, we're going to be speaking about Odell Beckham Jr. signing a one-year deal with the Ravens, what that means. Are they able to lure Lamar Jackson back? The NBA playoffs are coming up. And I want to advocate for NFL running backs to strike because this is a labor situation that's getting out of control. Plus, John Rahm yesterday at the Masters sticking it to the live golf cronies. YouTube.com/ESVN show today at 4 p.m. And what's happening on Left Reckoning, if you know Bradley, to speak for Matt, who is still on grand jury duty.
Yeah.
What, we got like 2 more weeks of him being out? It's really unbelievable. Or around that.
Yeah, he said to us the April 21st, so that would still be around a week and a half.
Still,
in terms of you know, our dear Matt's prolonged absence. Yeah, it's, you know, I'm looking to see if there is any updates on tomorrow's stream yet. Not sure. I don't believe there are yet, but last week on Left Reckoning, David Griscom and Matt talked to Keith Brower Brown about recent changes in the United Auto Workers leadership, Sean Fain's election to become the leader of the UAW, and the fight to reform the labor movement. You guys can check that out, and they'll be live tomorrow night, as always. YouTube.com/Left Reckoning and Patreon.com/Left Reckoning for the postgame.
Yes.
The postgame.
And don't forget about Seder seeds. You want to order some of those seeds for consumption? You should do it. CedarSeeds.com. And a reminder that there are limited edition Majority Report t-shirts, the effing dork t-shirts in reference to Joe Rogan being too afraid to name Sam by name. That is on shop.majorityreportradio.com. They are limited edition, so get them while you can. Shop.majorityreportradio.com. All right, folks, the number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflakes has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back, 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 back. And the Africans are black, 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 black African. And the alpha males are black, 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 black. And the Africans are back, 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 back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back, back. Africans are black, black. Alpha males are black, black. Africans are back, back.
Come on. Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.